자, 여러분 잘 지냈죠? So this is week 5 class. So let's get started with the review of last class. Do you remember what we did? It was about bilingual and translators, the global society, which is more urgently needed. So maybe I'd like to remind you there are some opposing factors in the contemporary world. The world is getting smaller and smaller because of IT revolution. In human history, the world has never been reduced to such a small place. Why? Because if one thing happened in the corner of Africa, that will be instantly known throughout the whole world. But up to 1815, do you know the Waterloo battle? It took place in Belgium. Then, the Waterloo battle, the result, the British people, they didn't know that, even though they had a victory. So it took 4 days for the British people to get the news about this battle. So anyway, this is an amazing world of technology. And it's a flat world. On the other end, however, the language remains diverse. In another word, we have an amazing world of multilingual world. So, how we should bridge the language gap? There are two options. One is bilingual. Bilingual means the people who can speak his mother tongue and another common language. For example, the common language could be Spanish if they live in Latin America, or the common language, it could be French if they are living in Africa. So anyway, the bilingual, they should be perfectly bilingual in mother tongue and the foreign language. And also we need the translators, interpreters. So, we have 3 stories to support we need the bilinguals. And we have another 3 stories to support that we need more translators. So in this regard, Sakuntala, I would like to share one more story about Sakuntala. Actually, that is the Sanskrit. Classic Sanskrit play. So what is Sanskrit? So that is a mystery. So Sanskrit really existed. But Sir William Jones, he was a British man who lived in India. Actually, he was a judge of the Supreme Court in Calcutta. And he made a presentation at the Asiatic Society. Then, what he has presented was so shocking to the world at this time. Why? Because he announced that he found the ancient language the Indians used to use, that is Sanskrit. Actually, the Sanskrit is the common language of the Greek, Roman, European, and Indian. And he even argued Sanskrit is much more superior than the English language. So what was so surprising? Because at that time, the British people began to think that English is the most excellent language, but Sir William Jones, they challenged the traditional concept about English excellence. So it is also interesting to find he was multilingual. Can you believe that he learned 28 languages, including Chinese? But actually, he really wanted to learn Sanskrit language. But the Indians, I don't know why, they didn't want to teach Sanskrit language to the British judge. Anyway, he could find an Indian scholar, so he asked him, please teach me Sanskrit language. So finally he learned it. And he began to translate the classic Sanskrit text. So one of the most famous Sanskrit is Sakuntala. And what is the effect? This classic Sanskrit play was immediately translated into English, Spanish, French, and Italian. And it was the Europeans at the time was deeply impressed by the linguistic excellence and artistic beauty of this classic Sanskrit play. And one of the European readers was Goethe. As you know, he is a famous author of Faust. So Goethe was so deeply impressed by this classic Sanskrit play, so it is widely believed that he is Faust. There is a prologue of Faust. He wrote the prologue of Faust was influenced, it was modeled on this Sakuntala. So this is an example how important the translation could be to the global society. So in fact, the translator and the interpreter, so we will continue this class that today's class topic is translator. So what is it to become a translator? So in this regard, is it a part-time distraction? Or is it a full-time commitment? Or any story about interpreting and translating was in Korea? And also we are going to discuss, so what would be like of the translators and interpreters. And also this brings us onto another topic about Douglas Robinson. Douglas Robinson, he is a professional translator, and also he is the translation professor, and he's also a great scholar about the translation theory. So let's share what he says about what special skill, what special skills are required if you want to be a translator. So if you want to be an interpreter or a translator, what kind of skill would you need? So this is what we can get an interesting insight from what he said. So he asked the question, so what special skills should translators should have? He said, translators sometimes should be an actor. Actually, the translator or interpreter, in a sense, is a copycat, imitator of original writer. And they should be act. It should imitate the character of the original speaker. If the original speaker is a low-key and modest speaker, then interpreter must moderate your tone. But if the original speaker is someone very passionate and very enthusiastic, like Mr. Donald Trump, then you should also be the copycat of his character. So, in a sense, interpreter should be like an actor. And also he said, translator usually a great reader. So when I was a student at the graduate school of interpretation, one of the common things among my classmates is they are readers. They're constant readers. What do they read? Whatever. Some friends read the Agatha Christie detective story, and some other friends they can movie subtitle, and other students and cartoon, and they read a lot of stories. It depends. Constant reader. And at the same time, they are reading 3 or 4 books at the same time. Why? It's not recorded because they like it. And also traveler. The translator, interpreter, they're curious about the outside world. So they enjoy traveling overseas world. Actually, my dream is to become world travelers and go and just translate a very good English novel. And also, translator works like a diplomat. You may think that translator is an isolated job. You are working alone in the room. No. Translator or interpreter, they must have an active network of other translators or colleagues or clients. So it should be like diplomatic. You should communicator. You should be a cross-cultural communicator. So this is what the Douglas Robinson talked about. So what special skills that translator should have. So, and what was his conclusion? So Douglas Robinson says, then what makes a good translator? He said the 3 conditions. Actually, his conclusion is constantly the expectation of the client's readers. In other words, the clients or readers, they expect translators to be reliable. In other words, reliability is very important to become a good translator. So, and the reliability and also speed. Speed is very important because you should translate or interpret as fast as possible. Because the customer always wants the punctual delivery of their translation work. They don't want to delay. So, and also he emphasized the translator's ability to do fast has something to do with the income. In other words, the faster you can translate and the more money you can get. So, let me take an example. So, I used to be translator or interpreter, then I usually found some in trend, but I wouldn't say it was more than 5 years ago, but I wouldn't say this is still true in the today, but at that time, I was translating. And occasionally, I do occasionally interpreting. I didn't do much interpreting, except by voluntary service at the church. I'm still interpreting for my pastor Sunday on the church. Anyway, and also I was writing journal. In other words, I writing the reports for foreign media. So you might be curious, how much money? As you can see, interpreting, that takes the speed. You might say, wow, interpreting, it should be very fast and it can take time, and the journal also takes time. So how much money? Personally, I usually found it's already, when money comes, 1, 10, 1, 2, 20. Let's say, if interpreter earns 10 won one day, the translator can earn only 1 won. So the ratio is 10 to 1. Then you might say it's not fair. Why? I personally felt interpreter tend to be overpaid and the translator is actually underpaid. I still believe that translator is underpaid, but now I changed my mind. Interpreters, they do not overpaid. That's the fair price. Why? Because at that time, I don't know now, the current rate at that time, the day was about 1 million won on a full day job, 100,000 won, but I don't know now. But anyway, it's not overpaid. Why? Because you might think, yeah, interpreting, you just work one day and just get the 100,000 won, that will be overpaid. No, that's not true. Why? Because if you have an conference, then you must research. You must study at least 7 days. In my case, I usually study 10 days. So that's the result of the 7 or 3 or 4 days of result on the topic and the background information. You must study a lot. But when it comes to this journal, that it depends. Sometimes it's very cheap. For example, I used to write IPS. The IPS is a global service, but they are very poor. So they cheap. But sometimes expensive. Sometimes this is a promotional article. It's a sponsored article that they paid a lot. So anyway, this is monimeter. So in conclusion, you said speed. So you might say interpreter is faster than translator. And the other thing is work for the going rate. What does it mean? In another word, the clients want you to translate cheaply. They don't want to pay a lot. So these are the 3 conditions to make the good translator. So let's take an example. So reliability, Douglas Robinson, he explained why the reliability is important. Reliability is a source of professional pride. So as I said, that the translators don't expect to earn too much money, but it's a matter of professional pride. What does it mean? Wow, I'm doing very important job. Money is not everything. And actually, I'm doing something that nobody else can do. This is professional pride. Why? Because I translated, I worked very hard, and as a result, then my readers, they learn a lot, and my clients appreciate my work. This is a professional pride. This is about the Yang Dong-chan. He's a translator. Then he used to be management manager. He used to be management student. He used to work for the technology company. Then he changed the job, the pharmacist, the yaksa. Then he happened to find the science or nature. Then he thought, wow, this is very interesting. So he began to study. So he happened to be the translator. So this is what his clients say about his translation. He says he has very literary imagination power, and also it is combined with engineering accuracy. And actually he said, a translator is really very challenging. I keep working, sometimes I'm working for 12 days alone. So, and also finally, he published a book. So he translated The Invention of the Nature. So it's amazing to find that the management student and also the pharmacist, they can also, the translator, professional translator, and also the publishers, they appreciate the quality of his translation. So he says his translation is is a combination of his knowledge and the writing skill and his personal experiences. So he feel rewarded because they appreciate, they recognize the value of my translation. This is a professional pride. This is a source of professional pride because the clients and readers, they rely on his translated text. And as you know, the 곽준철 교수님, 외대 교수님이시죠? 자, he said, speed is a source of income. Actually, he used to work as an interpreter for the president and the government, and he said, interpreting is actually that is service. Sometimes they must be talking. It could be sometimes one person, and it could be millions of people, if we translate it over satellite broadcasting, and this is the translating job, it takes performance pressure. He says the translator, the interpreter, they should have a key. What is the key? I don't know how to say in English. The interpreter should have a key. 키가 있어야 된대. And his key should be overwhelming the audience, and even he should overwhelm the key of the speaker. So in Korean, 자, 통역 간의 키가 이 사람들을 눌러야 된다는 거예요. So I would say the key is kind of confidence, that comes from confidence, energy. So he says, what is interpreter? Interpreter, don't expect. Interpreter is not a machine. If you have some assignment to interpret, study. And study, and study, and research beforehand. So when you begin to interpret, you should already anticipate what he would say. This is especially important. Why? Because as you know, Korean and English is synthetically different. The English is SVO, but Korean is SOV. So we must, in Korean, we say, we cannot guess until the Korean speaker ends his speech. We must wait until the last word of the Korean sentence if you want to translate it. That means, if you still wait until the end of the Korean sentence, then you are missing the boat. It's too late. There is too much silence. That's why, even though you cannot hear the last word of the sentence, you should anticipate what you say. 대받아치는 거야. So this is what he say. So he was talking about the speed, the importance of speed and the agility, 순발력. So that is the special skill required to be a good interpreter. So, Donald Douglas Robinson, he mentioned the third condition to make a good translator. What is it? You should like it. So let me take an example of Hwang Seok-hee. Hwang Seok-hee is he's a movie subtitle translator, and he is talking. This is his example of his translation of a movie subtitle. 개굴력, 아이고 좋겠네. 그래서 this is newspaper subtitle. 미국 B급 유머가 쏙쏙 들어오네. 그래서 so this is what he said. So he is a reader of a webtoon. So you might wonder, so how could I have this language sense to translate the American movie into Korean? He says, so that's because of a webtoon. Because I'm going to get the taste of the language. The webtoon, 만말, so 조석 and 이말년. So he always prays before he translate movie. So let me have talk like 조석 or 이말년. They are so funny and they have great linguistic player. So this is one tip that he'd like to share. If you want to be a webtoon translator, if you want a movie title translator, you must read a lot of webtoon. You can get the taste, you can develop the sense of linguistic, the language. So this is session 1. And let's move on to the session 2 is here. So last class is about translation theory. We are talking about the reliability. So today, reliability, what is reliability? That is about the accuracy. It is about accuracy or it is about effect. So if you translate, we talked about this is a source language text, and this is the target language text. So if you choose to more closely go to the source language, then your priority is accuracy. If you choose to closer to target language, then your priority is effects, create effect on the target language audience. So we talked about the vegetarian. 채식주의자. So actually the vegetarian, the Deborah Smith, she picked it up and he thought, wow, this is interesting, I'd like to translate it. But before she translated, there is another translator. I don't know her name. But the reader reaction was not so good. I don't know why. But Deborah Smith, after she translated it, he got a lot of reaction, good reaction from American and European. So I wonder what makes the difference. I just guess maybe the former translator of the vegetarian must have tried to closer to the source language. In other words, that her text must have sounded a little bit foreign. Foreign, because it was, I would say, that is kind of literal. Literal translation. In Korean, 쭉, 야. So literal translation. The literal translation is the most faithful to the meaning of the source text. Maybe the former translator was trying to get closer to the literal translation. But how about the Deborah Smith? When I read some part of, I didn't read all, just some pages. I read 5 or 6 pages of it, then I got the feeling, wow, this sounds fluent. When I read Deborah Smith's translation of the vegetarian, I said, wow, is it really translation? It sounds like English. It sounds fluent. There is no language, so it's not painful. It's synthetically painful to read. I couldn't believe it came from the Korean text. So it's interesting to find the Western readership, the positive readership, toward this fluent translation. But we have a question. It's always true. The novels should follow this principle of fluency? I don't think so. So this is the question we must discuss later. So anyway, it's interesting that Harvey, he is the translation theory scholar. He put this, there are several types of text reliability. So text reliability, he put it on the scale. Types of text reliability, that means that is the translator or interpreter, they must always decide to be literal or should be fluent. So actually, it depends on the scopus or the client's demand. So he put on the scale. So if the translator choose to be the closest to the meaning of original text, that is literal translation. So on the other end, if the translator, they are focusing on the effects on the target language audience, that is fluent or free translation. So for example, Hwang Seok-hee is this one. He sounds fluent. he just ignore, he almost ignore the original American subtitle. Forget about it. He understand the meaning and he rewrote it. So the movie subtitle, for example, the movie subtitle should be fluent enough. They cannot be literal. If we literally translate movie subtitle, nobody will understand. We will take an example in the week 9 class. So anyway, the Harvey put the degree of textile reliability on the scale. So literal. Then that is faithful. Faithful translation. Faithful translation is a little bit more effective than literal translation. It still follows the original text. Source language text. This is the target language text. So Harvey, he put the types of text reliability on the scale. So it starts from literal, that is the most faithful translation to the original meaning of this source text. What comes next is balanced. Balanced translation, it still cares about the meaning of the source text, but it also think about the effects on the target language audience. But here, it began to tilt toward the effects on the target language. That is, Harvey, he said idiomatic. What is idiomatic? So actually, idiomatic is something related to culture. It's most challenging to translate the idiomatic expression. So idiomatic, what is idiomatic? Idiomatic is if there is more than 2 words, and each word has its own meaning. But if 2 words are combined together, they create new meaning. That has nothing to do with the meaning of 2 words. That is idiomatic. So Harvey said there is the idiomatic translation. That means if you are a translator, read source text, understand it, then forget about it. Then you should restructure in the way that fit the target language audience. That is idiomatic translation. So, and also adaptation here. 변화. And we go free and fluent. So you can see, if you go to the free end of the scale, you can see that the translation should be creative. The translation should be imaginative, but there is one condition. What is the condition? No matter how free you may translate it, you cannot change the message. You cannot change the meaning of original text. But this is one condition. No matter how free you try to translate and how idiomatically you translate it and how fluently you translate, you cannot change the meaning. So this is the choice that you should make it, and it depends on the text. So as I said, this is usually the movie subtitle. And also the literal translation, example text will be technical report. When I'm translating the technical report, they always demanded don't edit it. Don't add meaning. Don't subtract meaning. I ask you to be just as faithful as the original text. So in this case, we can create the calc. In Korean, we say 모사. So this is one translation strategy when you decided to literally translate. For example, the kalk means, these are the translation like a champagne, bus, shashi, and sushi. These are the example of kalk. Kalk is mosa. You just borrow the foreign English and adapt it as a mother tongue. So this is one translation strategies we can see. So we can see that the difference, when it comes to text reliability, please think of the scale. So this is always the translator choice where we should go. Go closer to literalism, or should go closer to the fluent translation, or somewhere in between. So your decision depends on the scopus. What is scopus? The purpose of translation, or it depends on the client need, client demand. But please remember, no matter how fluently, you shouldn't change the meaning, you shouldn't change the message. So one translator said, so translation is like a woman. If a woman is beautiful, she is not faithful. And if a woman is faithful, she is not beautiful. Anyway, believe it or not. So the same is true with the translation. So this is a faithful woman, very faithful to original text, and this is a beautiful woman. So if Koreans read the translated text, we said, wow, this sounds very beautiful and fluent. I can see any trace of English syntax. Then this sounds fluent, free, and beautiful. So let me spend 10 more minutes about the translators in history. In history, let's get started with the basic. In the history, in the Bible, there was Joseph and his 12 brothers. In the Genesis, Joseph was the youngest son, and his father, he really liked him best. So their brothers envied him, and they conspired to sell him to the Egyptian slave trader. So imagine, the Joseph became, one day he woke up and he found a slave in an Egyptian house. So after time, with their story, then Joseph happens to be the prime minister of Egypt. On the other hand, his brothers, at their hometown, there was a famine. So they needed food. So they traveled to Egypt. So they asked Joseph to meet, and they bowed down to his youngest brother that they sold them out as slave traders. But the brothers didn't recognize Joseph. But Joseph recognized his brothers. So at that time in the Bible, there was a Joseph and his brothers home. There was interpreter. So interpreter between Hebrew and the Egyptian language. That is the first record about the interpreter in the human history. Now let's move on to the Greek. As you know, the Greek was the power, the Hella. At that time, was there a translator? Oh, you might doubt. Why? Because at that time, almost every country, they spoke the Greek. So in a sense, the Greek was something like English in contemporary world. So the Greek didn't want to learn foreign language. Why we should bother to learn foreign language? Everywhere we go, they already spoke the English. The same is true English. Everywhere we go, then you don't have to speak another language. But still, there was a translator. The Greek, they have some philosopher. There is a record that there are some philosophers, Greek philosophers. They was reading Egyptian text. That means that someone has translated from Egyptian language to the Greek language. Then how about the Latin? So the Latin was the lingua franca at the time. So that we are going to study why the Latin was the dominant language at the time. But the Latin, so it was the first reason was the power, the military power. We'll say the why. The Latin could be the global language at the time. That was the power of the Roman troop. So they conquered. So each time they conquered each colony, the Latin language followed. So the Latin and finally the military power disappeared. Then still the Latin word remained dominant. Why? Because that was the Roman law. So there was a global spread of Roman law. So everybody at the time, the Greek people and in the European people, they had to translate the Roman law from Latin to their language. So Roman law. And the third reason is, as you know, that is one power that made it possible for the Latin language to remain dominant for 1,000 years. That is church power. Okay, so we're talking about the Hebrew and Greek and Latin. How about China? China in BC, 9th century, there were already interpreters. So there is a record. There was a Chinese interpreter. So they were working on a diplomatic mission, or they were working on a commercial mission. The Chinese, and also in the Han Dynasty, there was the merchants. The Chinese merchants, they began to do business with India and the Southeast Asia. So at that time, they hired interpreters and they took them with them when they are traveling to India or the Southeast Asia. And also in China, there is a record, there is the interpreter who worked for the government. We would say in Korean, we also had an interpreter who worked for the government. That is, in Korean, we say 역관. So China, and also we can talk about the conquest. America conquest, Latin America. So we will continue. We will continue the history story about the translators when we are back in the session 2. Then in the next session, the session 2 is about translation theory. So now we are going to share. So we are going to share the example of how different the translation become when you decided to closer to source text or when you decided to go to the target text. So I have prepared this text is here. So we talked about 한자의 유형성. So we will start with this one. In session 2, we will continue with this one. Translating differently on the scale of text reliability, this is what we said. So we can decide to go closer to the faithful translation or closer to free translation. So we are going to practice some text here. For example, this is the text from the 한자 유형성. So we are going to practice together how we translate, we feel closer to source language text, or how we differently translate if you decide to the target language text. So we will get back in session 2, translate this text.